My parents did not leave me in the rain because I was a bad daughter. They left me because my twin sister could make a piano sing, and I could only make it tremble. My name is Clara Bennett now, but I was born Clara Whitmore, the second daughter in a house where love sounded like applause and silence meant failure. I am 31 years old today. People know me as the founder of SoundBridge, a program that helps children find their voices through music, rhythm, and stories. They see me standing on bright stages, speaking calmly into microphones, receiving awards from people who once would not have looked twice at a frightened little girl with shaking hands. But before the cameras, before the applause, before anyone called me inspiring, I was 12 years old with a small blue suitcase beside my feet, watching my parents sign papers at the back entrance of a residential arts center as if they were returning a damaged instrument. My twin sister, Violet, was still in the car. She was crying behind the window. I was outside. That was the difference between us. In Charleston, South Carolina, the Whitmore name meant elegance. It meant polished floors, private recitals, velvet curtains, and wealthy parents whispering about scholarships while their children sat stiffly at grand pianos. My father, Douglas Whitmore, owned Whitmore Conservatory, a famous music academy where children were trained to become extraordinary before they were old enough to know whether they wanted to be ordinary. My mother, Patricia, was the face of the school. She wore pearls the way other women wore armor. She could smile at donors, adjust a child's posture, correct a mother's pronunciation, and make a family feel lucky to be judged by her. To the world, they were visionaries. To me, they were judges. Violet was everything they wanted. She had delicate hands, perfect timing, and the calm expression of a child who had learned early that mistakes cost love. When she played piano, adults stopped talking. My father stood taller. My mother's eyes shone. People said Violet was gifted, rare, born for greatness. I loved my sister. I truly did. She never mocked me. At night, when our parents were downstairs discussing donors and enrollment lists, Violet would sit beside me on the carpet and whisper, "You hear music differently, Clara. That does not mean you hear it wrong." But in our house, different was just another word for disappointing. When I touched the piano, my fingers stiffened. If someone watched me, the notes scattered in my mind like birds startled from a tree. I could feel the emotion inside a song. I could tell when a melody sounded lonely, when a chord felt like a door closing, when silence carried more pain than sound. But I could not perform the way Violet did. And performance was the only language my parents respected. At dinner, my father did not ask whether I was happy. He asked how many measures I had practiced. My mother did not ask what frightened me. She asked why my shoulders rose when I played, why my wrists were weak, why my face looked so tense in front of guests. One evening, after I froze during a practice recital, my father closed the piano lid so sharply the sound cracked through the room. "Violet carries the Whitmore name," he said. "You make people wonder what went wrong." My mother looked away, but she did not defend me. That hurt more than his words. A father's cruelty can bruise. A mother's silence can hollow out the bone. Violet stood near the doorway, pale and trembling. I saw her lips part as if she wanted to speak, but our father's eyes moved toward her and she lowered her head. She was the golden child, yes, but gold can still be locked in a cage. The year everything broke, Whitmore Conservatory hosted a scholarship showcase for young musicians. My parents announced that both Whitmore twins would perform. Violet would play a difficult classical piece. I would play something simpler, chosen by my father, cleaned and polished until every note felt like a command. For weeks, I practiced until my fingertips ached. Violet helped me in secret. She tapped the rhythm on my knee. She told me to breathe. She told me to imagine the room empty. But on the night of the showcase, the room was not empty. It was full of donors, teachers, parents, cameras, and my father's cold expectation. Violet played first. She was flawless. The applause rose like a wave. Then it was my turn. I sat at the piano. The bench felt too high. The keys looked too white. Somewhere in the front row, my mother's pearls caught the light. My father gave me one small nod. I began. For a few seconds, the music lived. Then my hand shook. One note slipped. Then another. My mind went blank. The room seemed to lean toward me. Someone coughed. Someone whispered. I stopped completely, my fingers frozen above the keys. No one came to help me. Not my father. Not my mother. Only Violet stood halfway from her chair, tears shining in her eyes. That night, my parents did not yell. Somehow, their calm was worse. My mother folded my recital dress and placed it in my suitcase. My father said they had found a place that could handle children with my emotional needs. I thought it was temporary. I thought maybe they had finally found someone who could help me. The next morning, they drove me away from Charleston while Violet cried in the back seat beside me, holding my hand so tightly our fingers hurt. At the entrance of the Residential Arts Center, my father told the staff I was unstable under pressure. My mother said they had tried everything. I wanted to scream that I was not unstable. I was scared. I was not broken. I was unheard. But the adults spoke over me, as adults often do when they have already decided a child's worth. When my parents turned to leave, I ran after them. My father paused at the car door and looked down at me, not with anger, but with something colder. Violet has a future, he said. You need to stop standing in the way of it. Then he got into the car. Violet pressed both hands against the window, sobbing my name. My mother did not turn around. The car pulled away, carrying my sister, my childhood, and the last foolish hope that my parents would choose me if I cried hard enough. I stood there with my suitcase, listening to the tires fade into the wet road. And for the first time in my life, I understood the truth. I had not lost my family because I failed at music. I had lost them because they never knew how to love a child who did not make them look magnificent. For the first week at the Residential Arts Center, I slept with my shoes on. I told myself my parents might come back in the middle of the night, whisper my name, and say there had been a terrible mistake. I wanted to be ready. I wanted to run to the car before anyone could change their mind. But no car came. No footsteps stopped outside my door. No mother's voice called me home. The place was called Magnolia House, a name too soft for what it felt like to a 12-year-old girl who had just been left behind. It sat on the edge of Savannah, hidden behind iron gates and moss-draped oak trees. From the outside, it looked peaceful, almost beautiful. Inside, it smelled of floor polish, old sheet music, cafeteria soup, and children trying not to cry too loudly. There were other children there. Some had lost parents. Some had parents who could not care for them. Some had been sent away because they were angry, quiet, difficult, distracted, or simply inconvenient. I learned very quickly that children could recognize abandonment in each other without needing to explain it. Still, I did not think of myself as abandoned at first. I thought I was being tested. Every morning, I wrote letters to my parents. I apologized for freezing during the showcase. I apologized for embarrassing the Whitmore name. I promised I would practice harder. I promised I would stop making up stories in my head. I promised I would become the kind of daughter they could sit beside in public without shame. I wrote to Violet too, but I never knew if those letters reached her. After 2 weeks, one envelope came back. Returned. That single word cut deeper than any shouting could have. I stared at the red mark until the letters blurred. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had reached inside me and removed the last warm thing I owned. That afternoon, I stopped waiting by the front window. I stopped asking the staff if anyone had called. I stopped saying Whitmore when people asked my name. The instructors at Magnolia House tried to be kind, but they saw me through the papers my parents had signed. Anxious. Resistant. Emotionally fragile. Unable to meet performance expectations. Those words followed me from room to room like shadows. During music hour, I sat at the back and pretended to read. The piano in the common room was old, with yellowed keys and a cracked wooden side. Sometimes, when no one was looking, I would touch one key gently and listen until the sound disappeared. I did not play songs anymore. Songs belonged to Violet. Songs belonged to stages and judges and my father's disappointed eyes. But sound still found me. Rain on the windows. Spoons tapping bowls. A child crying into a pillow. A staff member humming while folding laundry. Each noise carried a feeling, and every feeling turned into a story inside my head. One evening, a younger boy named Marcus crawled under a table during dinner because another child had laughed at the way he read aloud. The staff tried to coax him out. He would not move. I knew that kind of shame. It made your body heavy. It made the world too bright. I took my spoon and tapped 3 soft beats against my cup. Marcus stopped crying. I tapped again, slower this time, then whispered, "That is the sound of a turtle walking home." He looked at me from under the table. I added 2 quick taps. "And that is the rabbit pretending he is not lost." For the first time all evening, Marcus almost smiled. I did not know it then, but that small moment was the first seed of the life I would build years later. I only knew that, for a few minutes, another child felt less alone because I had hurt him without making him explain. A few days later, Violet found a way to reach me. A counselor handed me a folded piece of paper with no envelope. Inside was a tiny drawing of 2 girls sitting under a piano, their shoulders touching. Beneath it, Violet had written, "I still hear you, Clara. Please do not disappear." I pressed that note against my chest and cried until my throat hurt. Not because it fixed anything. It did not. Violet was still in that glittering house. I was still behind Magnolia House gates. But her note proved something my parents had tried to erase. I had existed. I was remembered. Then came the Saturday that changed my life a second time. A woman with silver hair, warm brown eyes, and a canvas bag full of children's books walked into the common room. Her name was Clara Bennett. She was a retired librarian who volunteered at Magnolia House every weekend. Most adults arrived with plans. Nora arrived with patience. She did not ask me to perform. She did not ask why I was there. She simply sat near me while I tapped my fingers against the table. After a while, she said, "That rhythm sounds like someone trying to be brave." I froze. No adult had ever heard that much from so little. I expected her to correct me, to tell me to sit properly, to stop fidgeting, to be normal. Instead, she opened a book and said, "Would you like to tell me what happens next?" I looked at her, suspicious and aching. "What if I get it wrong?" I whispered. Nora smiled, and it was the first smile in a long time that did not feel like a test. "Stories do not have to be perfect to be true," she said. The next Saturday, she returned with her husband, Thomas Bennett, a quiet man with broad shoulders, rough hands, and eyes gentle enough to make frightened children lower their guard. He noticed the broken piano before he noticed anything else. Without making a speech, he knelt beside it, opened his toolbox, and began to work. When the first repaired note rang through the room, every child turned. Thomas looked at me and said, "Come here, Clara. Tell me what that note feels like." My throat tightened. No one had ever asked me that before. I touched the key softly. "It feels like a window opening," I said. Thomas nodded as if I had given the most important answer in the world. "Then we had better keep it open," he said. That was the beginning of Nora and Thomas Bennett. Not a rescue with trumpets. Not a miracle wrapped in bright light. Just 2 ordinary people who saw a child sitting in the dark and decided not to walk past her. The first night I slept in Nora and Thomas Bennett's home, I did not unpack my suitcase. I placed it beside the bedroom door, the same way I had kept it at Magnolia House, ready for the moment someone changed their mind. Children who have been left behind do not trust soft blankets right away. They wait for the floor to disappear. Nora did not force me to settle in. She only put clean pajamas on the bed, a glass of water on the nightstand, and a small brass lamp near a stack of books. "This room is yours," she said gently. "Not borrowed." "Yours." I nodded, but I did not believe her. The room was small, with pale curtains, a wooden desk, and a window that looked out over a narrow backyard where Thomas repaired old instruments under a covered porch. Compared to the Whitmore house in Charleston, it was plain. No marble floors. No crystal lights. No framed newspaper articles about gifted children and elite performances. But the house had something I had never known before. It had peace. In the mornings, Nora hummed while making oatmeal. Thomas drank coffee from a chipped blue mug and read the local paper with his glasses low on his nose. No one reviewed my posture. No one compared me to Violet. No one turned breakfast into a report card. At first, that kindness frightened me. When I spilled orange juice on the table, I froze so hard my fingers went numb. I waited for my father's voice. I waited for my mother's sigh. Thomas simply reached for a towel. "Tables survive worse things than juice," he said. Nora smiled and added, "So do people." I wanted to cry, but I had not learned how to cry safely yet. School was harder. I was behind in some subjects, nervous in groups, and terrified of being watched. When a teacher called on me, my mouth dried. When someone laughed in the hallway, I assumed it was about me. The old words lived under my skin. Unstable. Difficult. Not enough. One afternoon, I brought home a paper with a low grade. I hid it under my mattress, but Nora found it while changing the sheets. My stomach dropped when she walked into the kitchen holding it. I whispered, "I can do better." She looked at the paper, then at me. "Of course you can," she said. "But this paper does not decide whether you are loved." That sentence broke something open in me. Not loudly. Not all at once. But enough. Thomas began letting me sit beside him while he repaired old pianos, violins, and music boxes people had given up on. He would open the wooden backs and show me the hidden parts, wires, hammers, springs, little pieces that had to move together before music could return. "Most people only notice the song," he told me one rainy afternoon. "They forget how much patience it takes to bring the song back." I thought he was talking about instruments. Years later, I understood he was talking about me. Nora took me to the public library every Saturday. She gave me notebooks, not practice charts. She asked me to write what a thunderstorm sounded like, what loneliness would play if it had keys, what hope might hum at the bottom of a staircase. For the first time, my imagination was not treated like a defect. It was treated like a door. I began recording stories on an old tape recorder Thomas fixed for me. I did not have to stand on a stage. I did not have to look into anyone's eyes. I could speak into the small machine and let my voice come out slowly, safely, one sentence at a time. At the library, younger children began gathering around when I played my recordings. Some struggled to read. Some could not sit still. Some stared at pages the way I used to stare at sheet music, certain the world had hidden a language from them and then blamed them for not understanding it. I knew that look. So I changed the stories. I added claps for commas. Foot taps for brave moments. Soft bells for sad ones. I let children act out words instead of only reading them. I turned difficult sentences into little songs. I watched a boy who hated books lean forward because, for once, the lesson was not accusing him. It was inviting him. Nora saw it before I did. "Clara," she said one evening, "you are teaching them." I shook my head. "I am just making it easier." "That is teaching," she replied. In high school, I joined the audio club. I stayed behind the microphone, where nobody could see my hands tremble. My stories played during morning announcements, then at library events, then at a small children's program Nora helped organize. I was never the girl with perfect grades or shining trophies, but teachers began noticing something my parents had missed. I could reach children who had stopped reaching back. Violet and I found our way to each other slowly. At First, her messages came through secret accounts, short and careful. Then, after she turned 18, they grew longer. She told me about competitions, migraines, standing ovations that felt like chains. She apologized for not saving me. I told her the truth. You were a child too. There was silence on the call. Then she cried in a way I had never heard before, not like the gifted daughter, not like the perfect twin, but like a girl who had been lonely inside applause for too many years. In college, I met Aaron Miles during a volunteer program for children with speech and learning differences. He had a calm voice, kind eyes, and the rare gift of listening without trying to fix everything immediately. He watched me help a little girl use drum beats to explain her anger, then said, "You understand what children are saying before they have words for it." I laughed because I thought he was being polite. He was not. Aaron became my partner, then my husband, and eventually the first person who helped me turn my strange little methods into a real program. We called it SoundBridge, because that was what I had always needed as a child. A bridge. Not a stage. Not a spotlight. A way across. We started in library rooms with borrowed chairs, second-hand instruments, and lesson sheets I drew by hand. Nora led story circles. Thomas carried boxes, repaired keyboards, and tuned every donated instrument like each one mattered. Aaron worked with children who struggled to speak clearly, follow instructions, or trust their own voices. Then one afternoon, a mother posted a video of her son reading his first full paragraph by tapping the rhythm on a small drum. The video spread. Messages came in. Then calls. Then interviews. Then invitations. People called SoundBridge innovative. They called me inspiring. But every time someone praised me, I remembered the little girl with the blue suitcase who had once believed she was too broken to keep. And I wished I could tell her the truth sooner. She had never been broken. She had only been waiting for someone patient enough to hear the music underneath the silence. The morning my face appeared on national television, my hands were still cold. Not because I was afraid of the cameras. Not anymore. I was afraid of what success might wake up in people who had slept peacefully through my pain. The award ceremony was held in New York, in a theater with golden walls and lights so bright they made every face look unreal. I sat between Aaron and Nora while Thomas kept smoothing the front of his jacket as if he still could not believe he belonged in that room. To me, he belonged more than anyone. When they called my name, the applause rose around me like a tide. Clara Bennett, founder of SoundBridge. I walked to the stage slowly. For one sharp second, I was 12 again, walking toward a piano while my father watched from the front row. My chest tightened. My fingers remembered fear. Then I looked down and saw Nora crying, Thomas pressing one hand over his heart, Aaron smiling like he had always known I would stand there. I breathed. The host asked what had inspired my work. I could have told the whole story. I could have said my parents sent me away because I could not perform like my twin sister. I could have named Whitmore Conservatory, named Douglas, named Patricia, named every door that closed. But I did not. I said, I was once treated like a child who was not worth keeping. Then two ordinary people taught me that children do not need to be perfect to deserve patience. The camera turned to Nora and Thomas. The room stood. Across the country, my biological parents saw it. 3 days later, my phone lit up with a message from a name I had not seen in years. Patricia Whitmore. She wrote that she had watched me on television. She said I looked beautiful. She said my father and she were proud. She said enough time had passed for healing. I read the message twice. There was no apology. No Magnolia House. No returned letters. No suitcase. No rain. Only pride, arriving late and dressed in expensive language. Before I could answer, Violet called. They messaged you, didn't they? She asked. Her voice sounded thin, tired, almost ashamed. That was when she told me the truth. Whitmore Conservatory was in trouble. Former students had begun speaking publicly about panic attacks, humiliation, and being pushed until music became punishment. Donors were nervous. Parents were asking questions. A gala was planned to save the school's reputation. And I, the daughter they had erased, had suddenly become useful. Violet had heard our mother say my story could show that the Whitmore family produced excellence in many forms. My father had said the public loved redemption, as long as the family controlled the narrative. The word narrative made something in me go still. Not daughter. Not Clara. Narrative. Aaron found me sitting at the kitchen table long after sunset, Patricia's message open on my phone. He did not tell me to forgive. He did not tell me to fight. He only asked, "What would give you peace?" I thought of the little girl who had chased a car through the rain. I thought of Nora opening a book beside me. I thought of Thomas asking what one broken piano note felt like. Then I replied to my parents. I invited them to dinner. They arrived that Saturday with white flowers, a bottle of wine, and smiles polished smooth enough to fool strangers. My mother held me too tightly, as if practicing for a photograph. My father looked around my home, noticing the framed awards, the piano in the corner, the shelves of children's drawings. "You have done very well for yourself," he said. For yourself. As if no one had carried me when I could barely stand. They did not notice Nora and Thomas at first. To people like my parents, quiet kindness often looked invisible. Dinner began politely. My mother praised the table. My father asked about SoundBridge growth, partnerships, funding, expansion. He listened like a man studying a business opportunity, not like a father hearing his daughter's life. Then Patricia reached across the table and touched my wrist. "Clara," she said softly, "perhaps it is time the world knew the full story of our family." Violet went pale. Aaron's hand found mine under the table. My father leaned forward. "We would like you at the gala. Your journey proves that strong foundations create extraordinary adults, even through unconventional paths." Strong foundations. I stood. The room became silent. "You are right," I said. "Success does begin with a foundation." My mother smiled too soon. So I turned toward Nora. When I was 12, I believed I was too damaged to love. Nora sat beside me and asked what my silence was trying to say. Nora covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Then I turned to Thomas. Thomas fixed a broken piano and taught me that something out of tune is not worthless. It only needs someone patient enough to listen. My father's face hardened. Finally, I placed the old returned letter on the table. Beside it, I laid the adoption papers. Then Violet, with shaking hands, placed down the copy of an old email she had kept for years. In it, my father had written that Violet was the family's future, and I needed to be removed before I damaged the Whitmore image. No one moved. My mother whispered, "This is cruel." Violet looked at her through tears. "No," she said. "What you did was cruel." Thomas rose slowly, not angry, not loud, but steady as stone. "Real family," he said, "does not return when the lights come on. Real family stays in the dark." My parents left before dessert. The flowers remained on the table, white and useless, like an apology no one had ever spoken. The next morning, I woke up believing the worst was over. For one quiet hour, the house felt almost peaceful. Nora was in the kitchen making tea. Thomas sat by the window, turning his old cap in his hands. Aaron stood beside me without speaking, because he knew silence could be medicine when the world had been too loud. Then Violet called. Her voice shook before she even said my name. "They posted something," she whispered. Whitmore Conservatory had released a public statement. My parents called themselves heartbroken. They wrote that their estranged daughter had invited them to dinner only to humiliate them. They said they had made painful choices years ago to get me the support I needed. They said they had prayed for reconciliation, but outside influences had turned me against my real family. Real family. I read those words 3 times. Not once did they mention Magnolia House. Not once did they mention the letters returned unopened. Not once did they mention the email where my father called Violet the family's future and treated me like damage. To be removed from view. Then they made their biggest mistake. They tagged donors, education reporters, and organizations connected to SoundBridge. They thought shame would frighten me back into silence. Maybe it would have, years ago. Maybe the 12-year-old girl with the blue suitcase would have begged them not to be angry. Maybe she would have apologized for bleeding on the floor after they cut her. But I was not that child anymore. I sat at the dining table with Aaron, Nora, Thomas, and Violet on speakerphone. The same table where my parents had tried to turn my life into their public relations story. "What do you want to do?" Aaron asked. I looked at the returned letter lying beside my cup of tea. I looked at Nora's tired eyes, at Thomas's clenched jaw, at the little brass lamp in the corner glowing like a quiet promise. "I want to tell the truth," I said. "Not to destroy them. To stop them from using me." So I wrote one statement. Not long. Not cruel. Not dramatic. I wrote that I had been sent away at 12 after failing to meet my family's performance expectations. I wrote that I spent months believing I had to become perfect before I could be loved. I wrote that Nora and Thomas Bennett fostered me, adopted me, and gave me a home where my worth was not measured by applause. Then I wrote the sentence people repeated more than anything else. I was not shaped by perfection. I was saved by patience. Violet shared it first. Her post was shorter than mine, but it struck harder because the world knew her as the Whitmore prodigy. She wrote that being praised as the perfect twin did not make her free. It made her afraid. She wrote that I had not been difficult. I had been different. She wrote that our parents had confused reputation with love, and silence had protected the wrong people for too long. After that, the story no longer belonged to my parents. Former students of Whitmore Conservatory began speaking. Quietly at first, then in waves. A violinist wrote about playing through fever because she feared losing her scholarship. A pianist admitted he had not touched an instrument in years because music still made his chest tighten. Parents came forward with old emails, harsh evaluations, and stories of children who had been treated like investments instead of souls. The gala collapsed within days. One donor withdrew. Then another. A children's arts foundation canceled my mother's keynote speech. My father resigned from a board that had once praised him as a leader in youth excellence. Reporters asked questions he could not polish into answers. They were not ruined by my revenge. They were exposed by their own record. My father sent one final message. "You have destroyed the family name." My mother sent another. "I hope you are satisfied." I waited for the old pain to rise. I waited for the little girl inside me to panic, to reach for approval, to want one kind word from the people who had thrown her away. But the hunger was gone. I typed only one reply. "Children are not instruments you discard when they play a different song." Then I blocked them. Violet did the same a few weeks later. Not because I asked her to, but because she was tired of being loved only when she performed correctly. She came to Portland that spring, carrying 2 suitcases and a silence so heavy it seemed to bend her shoulders. Nora made soup. Thomas tuned the piano. Aaron gave her space. I sat beside her on the porch until she finally said, "They called me gifted my whole life, but they never taught me how to be happy." I reached for her hand. For the first time, we were not the failed twin and the perfect twin. We were just sisters. SoundBridge grew after the truth came out, but I refused to build my future on bitterness. With Nora, Thomas, Aaron, and Violet, I started the Unheard Notes Fund to support children who had been called slow, strange, distracted, dramatic, or not talented enough. We gave libraries instruments. We trained teachers. We helped children tell stories in the language their hearts understood. At our first small fundraiser, Thomas stood in his old work jacket while children played mismatched drums and bells. Someone called him a hero. He shook his head. We just stayed, he said. Sometimes that is what saves a child. And he was right. My revenge was never destroying my parents. My revenge was becoming a woman they could not rewrite. If Clara's story reminded you of someone who was judged too quickly, overlooked too easily, or loved only when they were useful, leave a comment below. Like this story, subscribe to Still Waters Payback, and share it with someone who needs to remember that a different song is not a broken one.